The death toll from Myanmar's earthquake rises to over 1,700, while more than 300 are still missing.
Ukraine holds commemorations and celebrations to mark the third anniversary of the liberation of Bucha from Russian forces.
Finnish President Alexander Stubb pitched the date April 20 as a deadline for full ceasefire in Ukraine in his surprise visit to US President Donald Trump in Florida.
The death toll from the earthquake that hit Myanmar on Friday has risen to more than 1,700, the country's military-led government announced on Monday. Authorities told local media that another 3,400 have been injured and more than 300 are missing. According to a Chinese embassy social media post, in the early hours of Monday, 4 people were rescued from the rubble by Chinese teams. The epicenter of Friday's 7.7 magnitude earthquake, which struck near Mandalay, caused many of the city's buildings to collapse and damaged its airport. Then on Sunday, a 5.1 magnitude aftershock hit the area again. Rescue efforts have been hindered by downed bridges, damaged roads, unreliable communications and a civil war. However, on Saturday, Myanmar's resistance movement announced a partial ceasefire to facilitate rescue efforts. According to local media, many people have been left sleeping on the streets, either out of fear or aftershock, or because their homes were brought down. In neighbouring Thailand, at least 18 people have been confirmed dead since Friday's quake. On Monday morning, searches at a high-rise building in Bangkok, which collapsed, were still ongoing, as dozens of people are missing, according to authorities.
Ukrainian officials, soldiers and residents gathered to mark the third anniversary of the liberation of the town of Bucha from Russian forces. Russian troops quickly occupied Bucha, just 35 kilometers from the capital Kyiv, shortly after launching their full-scale invasion in February 2022. The occupation lasted for about a month until Ukrainian soldiers launched a counter-offensive repelling Russian forces. Hundreds of soldiers were killed, but their legacy lives on.
306 захисників і захисниць за період війни віддали своє найцінніше, віддали своє життя. І сьогодні цілий день фактично заходів в Бучанській громаді, але ми розпочинаємо з алеї героїв на центральному кладовищі.
But what they discovered as they returned to the city was horrifying, quickly making the town the epicenter of the war's atrocities. Mass graves of hundreds of civilians were discovered, and thousands of war crimes were documented during Russia's 33-day occupation. The memories still haunt many residents in this town, who are in turn demanding officials make no compromises in the ongoing ceasefire efforts.
У нас столько ребят похоронил, своих бойцов. Как? За что они воевали? Чтобы отдать вот эти территории. У нас в Конституции записано, что это наши территории. Это что мы должны сганьбить нашу Конституцию и это самое, и отдать вот это врагу это все. Тому я считаю, что нет. Нет, ни в коем разе.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky accuses Russia of stalling ceasefire efforts in a bid to seize more Ukrainian land. Kyiv says its intelligence indicates that Russia is preparing to launch a fresh military offensive in the coming weeks to strengthen their negotiating position.
Finnish President Alexander Stubb made a surprise visit to Florida on Saturday, meeting with US President Donald Trump for discussions on strengthening bilateral ties and enjoying a round of golf. Trump highlighted their talks on his social media platform, emphasizing cooperation, including the purchase and development of much-needed icebreakers for the US. He also noted their shared commitment to delivering peace and international security. Stubb, speaking to Finnish reporters in London on Sunday, revealed he urged Trump to set a deadline for establishing a ceasefire in Ukraine. April 20 would be a good time for a full ceasefire without any conditions, Stubb said, explaining that a deadline is crucial. Because it is Easter and because President Donald Trump will have been in office for 3 months, he added. The meeting underscores Finland's efforts to bolster international diplomacy while fostering closer ties with the US amid global challenges.
At least 2 people have been killed and 35 others wounded in overnight attacks on Ukraine, according to its authorities. Ukraine's Air Force reported that Russia launched 111 drones over Ukraine, 65 of which were shot down and 35 lost. An elderly man and woman were killed following Russian drone strikes on the eastern town of Kharkiv, which also hit a military hospital, which Ukraine's general staff denounced as deliberate and targeted shelling. In an overnight address, Ukrainian President Zelensky said that active measures were being taken to prevent the Russian army from advancing into Ukraine's Sumy and Kharkiv regions. On Sunday, Russia said its air defense systems shot down 6 Ukrainian drones. Separately, Russia claimed on Saturday that its military took control of settlements in the Donetsk, Zaporizhzhia and Sumy regions. A 5.1 magnitude aftershock hit near the city of Mandalay in Myanmar on Sunday morning as emergency teams continued rescue operations following Friday's massive 7.7 magnitude tremor. At least 1,644 people have died and more than 3,400 are injured, according to the country's ruling military junta. Rescue efforts have been hindered by downed bridges, damaged roads, unreliable communications and the civil war. According to local media, many people were left sleeping on the streets, either out of fear of aftershocks or because their homes were brought down. Meanwhile, Myanmar's resistance announced a partial ceasefire on Saturday to facilitate rescue efforts. In neighbouring Thailand, at least 17 people have been confirmed dead since Friday's quake.
Tens of thousands of people have gathered in Istanbul to protest against the arrest of the city's mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu. The rally was called by İmamoğlu's Republican People's Party, which has encouraged people to rally against his arrest across Turkey. İmamoğlu, widely seen as the main political challenger to President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's 22-year rule, was jailed on the 23rd of March pending trial on corruption charges. Critics say the charges are politically motivated, but the government insists the judiciary is independent and free of political interference. The Interior Ministry said that nearly 1,900 people have been arrested following mass protests since İmamoğlu's initial detention on the 19th of March. Earlier this week, 11 journalists were detained in morning raids, a move that's been criticised by press freedom groups.
Israel has expanded its ground offensive in southern Gaza, moving troops to the El Janin neighborhood in Rafah to create a security buffer zone. Heavy strikes are also continuing elsewhere in the enclave. The IDF says its forces are successfully dismantling Hamas assets and infrastructure. This comes as mediation efforts continue to bring the troubled ceasefire back on track after Israel resumed fighting almost 2 weeks ago. Hamas announced that it had accepted a Qatari-Egyptian proposal that would restore a temporary peace. The proposal would see Hamas free 5 living hostages in exchange for the resumption of aid, a weeks-long truce, and the release of hundreds of Palestinian prisoners. Israel, on the other hand, without offering details, said that it had countered with its own proposal in coordination with the United States. Meanwhile, Hezbollah leader Naim Qassem warned that the group will respond if Israel doesn't cease attacks on Lebanon. An Israeli strike targeted the Lebanese capital for the first time since a ceasefire was agreed in November. Qassem says Hezbollah will be left with no option but to, quote, resort to other alternatives if Israel doesn't abide by the deal. American actor Richard Chamberlain has died at the age of 90 after complications following a stroke. The veteran actor passed away on Saturday night in his home in Hawaii, just 2 days shy of his 91st. Chamberlain was best known for his roles in various television series in the 1960s through to the 80s, which earned him the nickname King of the Miniseries. His performances in Dr. Kildare, Shogun, and The Thornbirds all won Golden Globe Awards. In 2003, Chamberlain came out to the public as gay in his autobiography titled Shattered Love. He described the struggles he had to face in the entertainment industry, which led to him having to hide his sexuality.
We are standing inside the immersive room, which is spanning 1,500 square meters of projection surface. It's 360 degrees around, 8-meter tall screens where we really are feeling like we're in the midst of a movie, in the midst of this huge cinematic experience where you see the Nile, you see the Sphinx, you see the pyramids, you go in the tomb, you see everything that the beauty of Egypt has to offer in the most big and grander way. We move to the metaverse, where you can walk around freely in a room, be Howard Carter himself, be in his base camp, go through his notebook, listen to the music he was listening back in 1922 on the day he discovered the tomb himself, and then you go inside the Valley of the Kings and you are walking around in the tomb with a torch in your hand in this old digital world. We have learned now that Tutankhamun and all his treasures and the mask will never go out of Egypt anymore. Those are all being brought to the Grand Egyptian Museum, and they will stay there forever. So with this exhibit, we are really bringing something to the audience that is as close as you can get there.